So this book was a bit of an experience for me when I started writing this last year. I've been reading a lot of contemporary poetry ever since I left university, mainly because I needed to know what I was competing against, essentially, and I needed to see what else was captivating people's imagination at the time. So I'd read anything. I'd pick things up from Waterstones, I'd pick things up from charity shops, just anything that seemed remotely interesting to me, just to try and get as much contemporary poetry into my brain as possible at the time. And the thing that struck me between all the amazing, brilliant work that I did find was how cynical some of these collections were, and the emotional manipulation, the sadness Olympics, all these different aspects of it. This idea that the more miserable a piece of fiction is, the more artistic value it holds. And it really did bother me, actually, to the extent that it was keeping me up at night. So I felt the need to write about it in this book, and I suppose really that's what this is about. It's about lying and manipulation and the way that we kind of have to do this as writers for the sake of getting by. I suppose really I wanted to find some sort of line between expression and manipulation where these two intersect. So with that in mind, this first poem is called Influence A. Chinese takeaways provide an endless source of free newspapers. Mom encouraged me to read at every turn, her logic being that I couldn't know my worldview without first viewing the world, and print takes just a bit more thought than colours pumped into your eyeballs, filling in your grey. I like to play a game with those I trust, wherein we read the first 5 pages to each other, deadpan, and listen for inflections that betray agendas we would otherwise prefer not to display. The front page is a toddler's day trip in his sister's dress, how brave he is, how we should love him. The second is a doctor whose potential cure for Wernig Hoffmans could become reality by 2022. The third is for an actress down on her luck, showing some cleavage. A veteran's descent into dementia spirals down the no-man's land of middle pages, lost in folds, but some guy who found a hair in his bread roll can get a paragraph under the bombings in Paris. Findings thus far seem to indicate The Guardian is bollocks, and the Daily Mail is a borderline carcinogen, but this is why we play the game, to see things from a light beyond our own. A past acquaintance claimed he had no bias. He saw only a sequence of events, apparently. This exercise was wasted on him. Only fools are shackled to mundane priorities, he said. It's worth mentioning that he liked Ayn Rand, and my acquaintance was honestly an idiot. Thank you. So this is a narrative collection. I am fascinated by narrative poetry just as an art form. I find it to be so interesting in the ways that different people approach narrative poetry and the stories it can convey. So I wanted this to have a kind of running theme where I wanted this to feel like a story with a sequence with people who you learn about through these poems. And family, of course. The book is called Keep It in the Family. Family is an important theme here. So this is the poem, which is honestly the only reason anyone even knows who I am these days, because it was featured in the National Poetry Competition for some reason. This is 11 Years of May. A read of it A pertains a gherkin. I was cross-legged on the floor, bordering on 5 years old, when death was just a thing that grown-ups did, like holidays or weddings. We ate dinner in Sudoku silence, savouring the council howl's delight of fish and chips wrapped in the metro, and my father's entree, his pungent batter sticks, appeared to captivate me. You always want what you can't have, he said. You won't appreciate it. I whined until he caved, and the ascetic fire sent me rolling to the floor, scratching at my tongue while everybody laughed. No one could blame them. At dawn, Mother smiled from the door as I split branches with my brother in the garden. 20 years between us, and we still pretended these were swords, that we were gladiators. A feed of it B pertains to suicide. I was cross-legged on the floor, bordering on 6 years old, with plastic bricks and model trains to normalize my isolation, the way you let a new fish float for 15 minutes prior to release. Knock. My mother rose, crossword left unfinished, and spoke quietly with men in lime green jackets. The house turned sepia that day. My recollection is in Kodachrome. Your brother always loved you, she said. He loved all of us, always, but not himself, because he did drugs. Colin, named so because the midwife asked what they were calling him. That's my mother's sense of humour. A feed of its sea pertains a haunting. The lights came at the foot of summer's door. They'd manifest in droves, patchy frames of green and yellow, irregularly red, phantom jigsaw pieces blinking on and off. They outran me in the hallway, slipped away when I tore through the living room with aeroplane arms, emptying my lungs. Look out, it's Colin's ghost, as Mother wept into her hands. Ghosts exist when you're a child. They mean that no one has to leave if you don't want them to. I knew Colin was dying when the lights became ephemeral. For a time I could still summon them. With only a moment's breakdown, they would swarm like butterflies on bitter honey, because a child's pain is easier to digest and a single tear is much more tragic than a torrent. I knew that he was dead when the lights had bled me dry, when they refused to answer to an empty howl when I was 17.